What up, Wizards? It's the D. Yes, he of Mtg. We'd like it to Magic. And today I got a hot one for you. The top 10 cards that get better after rotation. Now, I know what you might be thinking if you're a fan of the channel. Hey, Dev, it sounds a little bit like the last video we did, the top 10 cards in 2022 standard. Sweet video. If you haven't seen it, give it a shot. It's in the description down there. But no, these are actually like very different videos, and there's a reason I wanted to do these kind of back to back. Think of this like the difference between the top 25 video that I do whenever a new set comes out and the sleeper video that I do whenever a new set comes out. There are a bunch of reasons why a card might land on this list, but it wasn't right for that list. Like there's an element of improvement that I expect to see from a lot of these cards. Like for example, Goldspan Dragon was on the best of 2022 standard list, and I don't really expect that card to improve much when rotation happens. I expect it to remain like a really good Magic card. But a lot of these cards I expect to improve for one reason or another. Whether the mana's a factor, creature type's a factor, we get cards in Innistrad Midnight Hunt that aid these cards in one way or another, or maybe some of these are just cards that I think have a lot of potential and the ability to break through and just haven't been solved yet. So there are a lot of reasons why a card might be on this list, and there's only one card between the two lists that repeats, and that's only because I'd be a fool not to put it on this list. Place your bets. I think it's a pretty easy one to guess. But enough introduction, let's go ahead and get into it after we like and subscribe and check out these links in the description, Twitch and Patreon, all that stuff. Self-promotion, 5 seconds. I think I nailed it. New record. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this list here. And you know we got to start on some honorable mentions. And I only really have one honorable mention, but I want to talk about multiple cards in the honorable mention because that's how all of my lists go. I never just like do it the way you're supposed to do it. And I'm sorry about that, but this way we get to talk about more cards, which is good. That's a positive outcome. So let's talk a bit about the removal in this upcoming format. Now I want to look at Poison the Cup, Vanishing Verse, and Burning Hands here real quick because there are a bunch of removal spells I'd like to highlight in this section, but these are the three that I think get the biggest lift from rotation and people are slowly coming around to in standard 2022 for one reason or another. People are starting to realize that Poison the Cup is better than they originally thought, especially when the options have been cut in the way they have, right? One of the reasons that these are going to get better is because we're not going to have Heartless Act. We're not going to have Eliminate. We've been spoiled by these like really ultra high target, high probability to have a hit removal spells for only 2 mana at instant speed. So when you got to improvise, you got to play stuff like Poison the Cup. But again, this card is better than you think it is. As far as Vanishing Verse goes, again, people are coming around to the idea that Orzhov is actually a pretty good deck. And you can build it a couple of different ways. There's an Orzhov Tempo deck. It's kind of an aggro deck in a lot of ways. But there's also an Orzhov mid-range deck that we'll talk about a little ways down the line in this video. And Vanishing Verse is maybe the premier piece of removal in those decks. Another cool thing about Vanishing Verse is that it seems as though the mana is going to be a little bit rough, honestly, once we hit rotation. Depending on what lands we get in Innistrad Midnight Hunt, it might be a little bit difficult to make 3-color and even in some cases 2-color decks. These mono white, mono red, and mono green aggro decks are a real force, and that is very good for the Vanishing Verse player. Burning Hands, just a really important sideboard card, and honestly I'd like to be able to talk more about sideboard cards in this video because I think that there are a lot of cards that are going to be really important once we get like access to sideboards, right? People that are playing 2022 standard right now, it's all best of one, there are no boards, so it's kind of hard to tell what's going to be important in the board, but Burning Hands is pretty obvious, and I think that you could actually play this in the main deck in some cases, but against those mono green decks, it's going to kill all of their, old growth trolls and werewolf pack leaders and just any creature they might be playing. So just a sick, even after they drop a land, it still kills a Kazandu Mammoth. There are a million reasons to play hands, even in the main deck, but at the very least, it will be an incredibly important sideboard option. But we're back, ready to start the actual list here, and this seems like one of the few entries on the list where I'm only really talking about one card, but we're going to talk for just a second about Nico Defies Destiny. Now, usually as number 10 is like an honorable mention, right? Like it's an honorable mention that I think is more worth talking about than the actual honorable mentions. And this holds true in this case. I'm not sure how good this card actually is. I'm not going to die on this hill or anything like that, but I think this card could defy its destiny as a piece of draft garbage that ties together your draft foretell deck and actually be a real card. Some people in 2022 standard have kind of bodied me with this card a couple of times. It is a little bit slow, but very often it gains 2 life when it ETBs because they, foretold something on their second turn. So that's something. And then later on in the game, the cool thing about this is that it lets you get that Doom Scar back. it lets you get the Solid coming back with all of your mana open. And that's just like kind of brutal depending on how the blue-white player has been able to set up the board state, you know. If they Doomscar for like 3 mana, foretell the Doomscar on turn 2, play this on turn 3, Doomscar on turn 4, and then they just get their Doomscar back, and that is sick. If you're playing aggro, that's a repulsive play because they get 2 Doomscars at least that game, pretty much guaranteed in the opening turns, and that's bad for you if you're playing any aggro decks. And I think aggro is definitely going to be more popular in the upcoming standard. I see more people playing creatures in 2022, and it gives me hope. But in any case, the ability to Doomscar into Doomscar because of Nico Defies, gain a little bit of life, foretell a card for free on the second chapter. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff about this card. And even though, again, I think it's kind of slow, and blue-white control is a little clunky, especially compared to Dimir control, which appears to be the better deck, I think that foretell control might be at least a lot better than it is in the current standard, in the next standard. All right, so let's go ahead and get numbers 9 and 8 out of the way, because, again, I would just be silly not to mention these 2 creature types on the list. But first, there's vampires. We know that this set in development was called Innistrad Werewolves. It's called Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So it's probably going to be some werewolves in it. So we'll talk about those in a second. But Innistrad is also home to vampires. There's a lot of vampires on Innistrad, in case you just don't know anything about any. There's vampires live there, and I would be surprised if we didn't get some beginnings of Vampire Tribal in this set, and then maybe they finish it off in Crimson Vow, which was codenamed Innistrad. Well, I guess in development they called it Innistrad Vampires. So pretty safe to say we'll get some vampires in that set. Maybe they'll finish off the tribal theme, but still, I think it's worth looking at some of the vampires we have access to in Standard. And a lot of them are good. Like, it's kind of surprising the amount of good vampires survive rotation we already have access to. Like, Westgate Region is a card that I've been looking at sideways for a while now. Might be pretty good, especially if it gets some support for its tribe. But aside from that, there's Null Priest of Oblivion, Valentin, Dean of the Vein. That's a vampire randomly. Vampire Nighthawk. It's right there in the name. It's actually not. It's Nighthawk Scavenger. It's doing a Vampire Nighthawk impression. But yeah, Nighthawk Scavenger is a pretty decent vampire. Immersturm Predator is a vampire. Let's not forget that. We've seen Black-Red Vamps before. We can do it again. And aside from that, like, there's not only Null Priest, but, you know, Cleric of Life's Bond. There's a couple of clerics that are also vampires, incidentally. If we see more of that, that might be interesting for the Cleric tribal deck, like a Cleric Vampire tribal deck. And then the same thing goes with Party. There's a couple of important party vampires, like Malakir Blood Priest or Zagreus, like the party payoff in Black-Red. And Black-Red, again, is a vampire color combination. So it could be that Zagreus is the top of your curve. If we see some vampires that play around with different, like, party subtypes, then it could be on. It could actually be on. I just want to point out that I'm kind of most excited for the vampire party thing. I want a vampire party. I also think it's kind of cool that a lot of these other creatures that I just mentioned are vampires too. So we already have some vampire support in Standard. But number 8 is Werewolf Pack Leader. What's the next entry? It's just obviously it's a set about werewolves. So yeah, it's a werewolf. It's like a really good one too. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a whole set full of werewolves and this is still the best werewolf in Standard. That's sometimes how Wizards likes to do things. So yeah, wouldn't surprise me or blow me away, but still. This is a werewolf. It has to be on the list. I'm just kind of boxed into putting it here, so yeah, Werewolf Pack Leader. But this is also the only card on the list that was also on the best of 2022 Standards list, because it's a good card. It's a good card, and it's going to probably get even better if you can imagine that. Now, my number 7 is another creature type, believe it or not. But this is one that I think is already kind of good, and people are starting to come around to it in 2022 Standard. But I want to say giants. I want to just say the creature type giants, but that's actually not what I'm going to do here, even though I think like Cyclone Summoner is a pretty good card. Actually, it's a really neat card. Igar is cool. There's a few. Calamity Bearer is dope. It's like their new tour brand once Mono Red rotates out. So like there's some good giants. Glimpse the Cosmos is actually a pretty good giant payoff too. Like look at that. But the card that I actually want to bring up here, because I don't think there's going to be too many giants. If you look at every single set that's ever taken place on the plane of Innistrad, and you try to find giants, you'll find 2. One is a piece of draft garbage, and then the other one is, oh god, what's its name? Hold on. I think it's Diregraph Colossus. I had to take like 3 seconds and think about it. I think it's Diregraph Colossus. Did I get that right? Hold on. It is Diregraph Colossus, and it's still like $350 too, actually. The card actually held a little bit of value because it's a sweet piece for like zombie commander decks, but it doesn't really care about vampires. It doesn't really care about giants. Like at all. So even if they like reprint this card, it's not like it matters. So there's just not a whole lot of giants on Innistrad. I don't think that the tribe is going to get that much help from this set coming out. But the card that I want to actually highlight here is Battle of Frost and Fire. This card is great, just in case you don't know that yet. And I think that it gets actually like better after rotation, where we just don't have access to a whole lot of great sweepers, right? We still keep Shadow's Verdict. We have Doomscar, I mean to say, which could have made the list too. Like, there are decent sweepers in the format, and I think it's going to matter to play okay sweepers. Because, again, I think aggro is going to be a thing. So I think the Battle of Frost and Fire, though, is among one of the better sweepers in the format. First of all, it just de facto does get better because Bone Crusher Giant isn't in the format anymore. Bone Crusher Giant's played in like 40% of standard decks or something. So Battle wouldn't be very good in that format, but we're still going to have access to it after rotation, where it kills everything from these small ball aggro decks, right? You don't have like Seasoned Hallowblade to worry about going indestructible anymore. You don't have Selfless Savior worrying about like saving the best creature on their side of the table anymore. So this kind of damage-based removal just does get better, as a matter of fact, you know? But aside from that, this will kill like all the goblins and the mono reds and the mono whites and the mono greens, all that stuff. It'll kill everything from like, you know, their 1-drops to like Old Growth Troll, but it also kills Goldspan Dragon because it does 4 damage, you know? Like, this is the Giants deck answer to not only Goldspan, but like pretty much every other aggro deck in the format. Like, Battle is going to be such a beating when it's just a one-sided sweeper. Whoops. You know? Turn 3 Giant, turn 4 Giant, turn 5 Battle. And it should be easy enough to do that. You know, you'll get to turn 5 if you drop an Igar on 3 and a Calamity Bearer on 4. Like, that's going to be tough for a lot of aggro decks to attack into and actually like kill you through. So Battle will often finish the job. And I've been playing Giants a little bit in 2022 Standard, and it's, if you're going to play Izzet, do you play this or the Goldspan Dragon deck, right? And actually, I think that it's not as clear-cut of a choice as you might think it is. And you still get access to Frostbite. You can still play Alrund's Epiphany if you want to, and all those powerful Izzet cards if you want to. But in the meantime, you get maybe one of the best sweepers in the format, and I'm not even kidding. We got to move on to number 6. I know Giants is a spicy one. Battle of Frost and Fire, whatever. But really, pay attention to that card. It's very good. The other 2 chapters are fine, too. I didn't even talk about them. It's just a good sweeper. In any case, number 6 is a card that people are already catching on to in mono green decks. You would see 0 of these, but now sometimes you'll see like a 2 of. And there's a reason for that, because Inscription of Abundance is actually a really, really good Magic card, almost no matter when you play it. And it can just blow people out sometimes. Like, you don't even need the removal mode, but the reason that it's on the list is kind of the removal mode, but it does so much more than that. The reason I think the removal mode is so important is because we keep Blizzard Brawl, which is already like maybe one of the most important cards in the mono green like 2022 standard deck, but we don't really have other good fight effects. You know, we lose Primal Might, we lose the other good one, Ram Through. Ram Through is going to be sorely missed. In any case, Inscription might be the other best fight effect we have access to. And that's not bad. It's actually a good fight effect. For 2 mana, straight up fight, instant speed is fine. Or just put a couple of counters on something at instant speed. You'd be surprised how often that blows people out in combat. But, you know, once you do get to 5 mana and you rip this off the top of your library in a long game, then suddenly this really just steamrolls people. You know, it takes people by surprise. Kill your guy, plus 2/+1/+1 counters on this dude, and just like get through for damage. It's just a really sick card, whether you're spending 2 or the 5 mana on it. So just keep your eye on Inscription. I think it's the best fight effect that also has this like potential for a buttload of value in the late game, while also being like modal and versatile. That just makes for a good Magic card, especially in the kind of like fair Magic that it looks like we're getting back to. Having access to this many decent options on a card and instant speed is just kind of always going to be decent. Now, right here in the middle of the list, I want to look at Dream Devourer for a minute. I hope people catch on to this card like pretty soon. Again, we're losing a lot of the good, 2 mana fast removal in this next format. We won't have Heartless Act or Eliminate and a couple of other things that people are kind of relying on right now. We do still have like Portable Hole. Like Power Word Kill doesn't kill this, so that's a point in its favor. But there's still small ball removal. A Frostbite that's fully powered can kill this. So, but a Frostbite that's not fully powered can't. So if you're on the play, you should be able to foretell a good card before they can frostbite it to death. So that's, again, a point in its favor in some ways. These little wrinkles count. But this, I think, is just one of the best ways to ramp in the format. Period. Like, I love Kalain, I love Prosperous Innkeeper, and I love the old, Shambling Ghast, Deadly Dispute trick, where you just end up with 1 billion mana on like turn 3. That's how black decks are ramping right now. But black decks could ramp this way on top of the Deadly Dispute, Shambling Ghast ramp tricks that they're doing to get like turn 3 5 drops. It's really, that deck, that combination of cards is super sick. But in any case, aside from ramping in that way, ramp decks need more ways to ramp reliably. And Dream Devourer is pretty good at that. It gets you a 6-drop on turn 4. You have to take off your turn 3 to actually cast this card. But I guess if you're also playing Shambling Ghast in your deck, you could play this on turn 2, foretell a card on turn 3, and play Shambling Ghast. And that's a good way to use your mana. Possible. At least maybe you want to play a bunch of 1-drops so you maximize how much turn 3 value you get, but still. You foretell a card on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you cast your 6-drop, whether it's Blood on the Snow against the aggro decks to cast a really early sweeper. Or you can get like Professor Onyx for 4 mana. That seems pretty good. Just anytime they print a card that's like 6 mana in black, keep your eye on Dream Devourer, because if there's some like really expensive splashy effects in black, Dream Devourer makes them like way more reasonable to cast, and I feel like this card's going to be more playable again just because of all the different removal that we lose once rotation happens. So if you're not playing Devourer in your mono black list yet, give it a try, because this card has done a lot of really cool things for me, and I think that there's something to it. Now, for number 4, I couldn't decide which mono red card I wanted on the list more, so I'm just going to say both Kargan Intimidator and Retriever Phoenix, okay? Retriever Phoenix takes the spot of, like, Phoenix of Ash. And this could be Flame Skull. If, in these mono-red decks, it could just be Flame Skull. But, ¿por qué no los dos? You have a creature like Flame Skull and a creature like Retriever Phoenix, so you've got an awful lot of value coming out of your graveyard. That is a nightmare for control, especially when you've got all the creature lands at your disposal, too. It's just poor control again against mono-red, but I say poor control. It looks like Dimir Control is actually a good deck in the upcoming format, but that's neither here nor there. I think both of these could be really good tools for mono red. Retriever Phoenix, it's not too hard to learn in mono red. It's really not. Or in red white, again, it's not super hard to learn. And the haste is important, the flying evasion is important. So there's a lot of cool things I like about Retriever Phoenix. Even if it only comes back once or twice in a game, it seems like it's doing its job. But Kargan Intimidator, there's not a whole lot of great 2-drops. Unless you want to play Goblins. And I think Goblins is a good deck. I really do. Like, Battlecry Goblin is a beast. Like, that is a house of a card while we're talking about mono red 2-drops. Battlecry Goblin is amazing. But I still think if there's a mono red deck that doesn't want to play Goblins and it just wants to play traditional mono red, this is probably the best 2-drop they're going to have access to, barring any crazy stuff that's in the Innistrad set. It's just, Kargan Intimidator hasn't gotten a whole lot of play in the last couple of years, or the last year. Just because, like, we somehow have better 2-drops than this. We're used to Runaway Steamkin, Robber the Rich, and all these broken 2-drops. And this is just like a good 2-drop. It's just a functional, decent 2-drop that does a whole bunch of stuff, gets through for 4 sometimes. If you got a deck full of warriors, it can make stuff not block. It's a really good Magic card for only a 2-mana investment. It's a great mana sink as the game goes on. So it's just amazing to me that this hasn't seen any play. But once we kind of tone down the power level a little bit, I think that mono red will probably look to this pretty quickly. We're in the top 3, though, and number 3 is kind of a swing for the fences, because I'm not sure this card should be in the top 3, to be honest, but I'm still going to say Turgrid. I think this card gets markedly better after rotation, especially if there are decks. I think there's going to be a fair number of aggro decks in the format. I do. But I still think there's going to be decks that are based around like getting the Goldspan, getting the Inferno with the Star Mounts, getting the Ebon Death, or some big creature, and just finishing you that way. And I think that Turgrid is going to be great. Like any sack strategies are going to be pretty decent against those decks. And cards like Soul Shatter are not only already good with Turgrid, pretty obviously, but they're also pretty decent in the upcoming format. Soul Shatter is a great tool against Goldspan Dragon. Like, just a fantastic, one of the best ways to deal with a Goldspan Dragon in the format. But it's pretty good at dealing with Planeswalkers, Inferno with the Star Mounts, other big creatures like that. And if your opponent is on Control or some other dirtly deck, and they're mostly looking to attack you with creature lands, Soul Shatter is surprisingly one of the better instant speed answers to creature lands, again, so long as they don't have any other creatures out. So I actually think Soul Shatter could be on this list too, but it's already seeing enough play. But, there's also cards like Professor Onyx that force your opponent to sacrifice creatures, and I think, again, get markedly better for a number of reasons. And that makes a card like Turgrid much more playable too, especially considering they go on curve together. So I'm just really liking the way Turgrid looks in the upcoming format. I also think that the kind of dirtly turn-by-turn value that the Lantern half of Turgrid provides you looks much better in the upcoming format too. So I think it's going to be a little bit more able to pressure your opponent turn-by-turn when you know that they're not just going to ultimatum you to death. Spend all my mana, you die. It's kind of how standard is sometimes nowadays. So hopefully we don't have that option as much, and a card that can again create this kind of turn-by-turn pressure like Lantern is going to be better too. So just on the whole, I think Turgrid looks better. Let's talk about number 2, which is Blood on the Snow. I think this card gets much, much better. Maybe not the absolute best sweeper in the format, but definitely the most comprehensive and swingy sweeper in the format, right? Like Doomscar, fastest sweeper in the format, takes out all the creatures. Shadow's Verdict, a little bit faster than this, but doesn't kill all the creatures, and often doesn't kill all the creatures you want it to. It doesn't kill gold spans and 4-drops and stuff. There's a number of 4-drops that line up really well against cards like Verdict. So Verdict actually has seen less play than I thought it would in a format full of aggro. So, if you're willing to go to 6 mana, this card is really good. And if you have ways of dumping Planeswalkers, or maybe you have a 4 or 5 mana Planeswalker that gets attacked into and dies, this card is really, really good at getting it back. And that's mostly the application I've seen it in so far. The Black-White Kaya deck creates a lot of value with those Ghost Form counters and a bunch of creatures with ETB triggers. It's a deck with creatures that can still play a sweeper and get incredible value from its creatures and the planeswalkers that it plays. It can, lose its planeswalkers and get them back turn by turn. So just a sick looking deck that there's a bunch of different ways to build right now. And there's a bunch of different color combinations that can leverage Blood on the Snow, right? The Dimir control decks that are doing pretty well so far in the early days of the format are sometimes just blue-black, and then sometimes they're snow, so they can play Gravenlore in Blood on the Snow and get their planeswalkers back. So again, this card is already seeing multiple applications as one of the better sweepers in the upcoming format, and I think that people will wake up to that more and more. And snow is just, in general, going to be a very important concept. Frostbite's one of the best cards in the format. Faceless Haven, Blizzard Brawl, these are all incredible cards. That will, I think, force the issue when it comes to snow. I think a lot of decks will be snow, and snow will just be more important in general, even than it is now. In a world like that, I like a card like Blood on the Snow. If you're going to be playing snow anyway, Blood on the Snow is a perfect sweeper for you. So, again, there are just so many applications post-rotation for this card that I think it's destined for something. Number 1 is another card that's already pretty decent and is already seeing some applications here and there, but I think the use of this card will increase dramatically post-rotation, and the respect the card receives will increase much more too, and that is Jaspera Sentinel. Here at number 1, numero uno Sentinel, and there's a reason for that. Now this card is already seeing play in the mono green decks in 2022 Standard. It's seeing some play in the Jund Treasure decks in 2022 Standard, so people are starting to catch on to how good the card is, but there are more decks that kids see play in, right? Like there's green-white life gain, there's just green-white mid-range, green-white counters. They're all decks that people are experimenting with, green-white tokens, which we had an amazing game with on stream the other night. I can't wait to post that to YouTube. But anyway, really good game. But there's a lot of green-white decks this goes in. There's a lot of green-black decks this goes in, getting you like Binding the Old Gods on turn 3. 5 drops on 4 and stuff like that. It's just an unbelievable card in pretty much any color combination you want to put it in, including mono green for that matter. And I think that, again, more people are going to catch on to how much this card helps fix their mana. If we don't see the lands we need to see in the Innistrad sets, then the mana is going to be pretty freaking bad. So Jaspera Sentinel might be a great way of producing that third color, right? Or even that second color, depending on how much of a splash you're actually doing. If you have a deck that's mostly mono green, but wants to play a blue card or a white card or whatever, then Jaspera Sentinel makes that so much more of a reality. It's also a great, combo with like Magda, which we've already seen. It's a great combo with Prosperous Innkeeper, turn 1 Sentinel, turn 2 Innkeeper, get a treasure token. You can cast a 2-drop now by tapping the Innkeeper and the Sentinel on turn 2, and it's just sick combinations, right? So whether this is getting you this ridiculous board state on turn 2 or it's getting you a 4-drop on turn 3, those are both excellent uses for the card. It's often getting you that third color that you need, or it's helping you get the second color. Maybe I want to cast a Skyclave Apparition in my green-white deck, and this helps me get the second white for it. There's just so many things that Sentinel does, from ramping you to fixing your mana in a world where mana looks desolate. So I think Jaspera Sentinel is just easily one of the better cards in the format, and even though there's a lot of opportunity cost in including this card in your deck, as opposed to something like Birds of Paradise. It's not free. You need to play creatures. You need to play relatively cheap creatures. I think that is enough of a reality in enough decks that Jaspera Sentinel might actually be one of the most powerful cards in Standard. But that's my list, and this again could have been a top 20. There's a bunch of cards I wanted to talk about, and I think it effectively is a top 20 when you add up all the cards we actually talked about today. But just let me know what I missed down there, anything that I didn't cover on the last list or this list that you think has a real shot in the next Standard. Let me know down there, because I'm always open to discussion. I think there's a lot of cards that are worthy of mention that I didn't get to mention here. So now it's your turn. Let me know about them. And then like and subscribe and do all that stuff. I'm almost at 122,000 subs. I think we need like 100 subs to get to 122K. Help us get there. Hit subscribe, hit the bell for the noties. You can also, again, try this stuff. If you want to see me play some Magic, twitch.tv/SPMTGDev, link in the description. And the Patreon's only $1 a month. It's just $1 a month. You get to vote on what content we do around here, which is a pretty fun deal. And you support the channel like a lot. Like $1 goes a long way when it's a bunch of people doing it. So it helps more than you could possibly imagine, is all I'm going to say. But again, that's all for this one. I guess I got to get to editing and go ahead and get this bad boy out. So again, just get at me in the comments section. Let me know how you felt about it and any picks that you would make for this list if it were your list to make. It is. It can be. Just make a list in the comment section. It's that easy. Or just make a list and put it on YouTube. I swear, it's easy. I don't know how I get away with this. I really don't. Make your own list. Put it on YouTube. It'll get some views. Probably. Right? Top 10 lists are relatively popular. I don't know. Give it a shot is all I'm saying. I support you in your endeavors. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.